One to the Human Resources Committee for the Rochester City School District. Today's date is September 20th, 2022. This is our first time meeting again as the Human Resources Committee in over a year. And so I want to acknowledge that it's been a year since this committee has met. And in addition, there's been some changes in transition and leadership. President Elliott, who had chaired this committee for a couple of years, and in fact was a big advocate in getting this committee started, has transitioned, and so that I was elected as the chair for this committee. So I do want to acknowledge that and thank President Elliott for her guidance and leadership around this committee, and also her insistence for this committee to exist. And we'll talk a little bit about our purpose as a committee in a little bit. But with that, I want to acknowledge that there are no speakers tonight. And I also want to review and accept the minutes from a year ago. And just before this meeting started, I want to acknowledge that the Board of Education minutes are by law required to be updated and posted in a timely manner. And so I do want to apologize to the public that these meetings minutes were not up by the required time frame. And I'm told that procedurally, we usually vote on minutes on the committee, but I don't think that that's an excuse for us to use, because we have lots of board business meetings where minutes are often voted on, not part of the committee itself. So I do want to acknowledge that, especially if we are on top of the administration about staying within the law, that we as a board also have to ensure that our minutes are up to date for our meeting. So I do want to apologize, but with that, can I get a motion and a second for the acceptance of the September 7th, 2021 HR Committee minutes?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye. So, but let me just also add on to that, Vice President LeBron. I would also just let the public know that we have been bombarded with a number of meetings, and that we have, unfortunately, with a lot of the requests that are made by this board, that in part has prevented us from updating just overall minutes in general. And so the board has done a yeoman's job in catching up on all the minutes from all the committee meetings. And yeah, it is by law that we have to do that. But I just also want to acknowledge that, you know, with all the work that the board tends to request of the board staff, that, you know, it's a matter of what gets prioritized and what's the priority. So I just also want to have that on record, that, you know, people are just not being remiss, but there's certainly, you know, we're just a high demanding board, and sometimes, you know, we can't accomplish all that we need to accomplish. So I just also want to include that on the record as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective too. However, it can't be procedurally that the minutes are voted on in the committee and the committee doesn't meet for a year, and so those minutes just basically get lost in the transition. And the priority should be that we follow the law. So I just have to say that because it was surprising to see minutes on my agenda tonight. But in any event, thank you for those comments.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
That's President, that's
Powell.
Commissioner Powell.
Yes.
Yeah, on this topic, before we vote, I just want to, for the record, articulate that I do not believe that anything was done incorrectly or inappropriately. We followed past practice. And I don't think anyone should be chastised for following past practice. I just left a meeting over the weekend, an annual membership meeting. We approved the minutes from the previous year. That's just how it's typically done. If we want to change it, we should establish it in our bylaws or by some other means, but chastising people in public for what you perceive to be late when it's not even been established that it's late is just unfair to our staff.
I just want to clarify that nobody is chastising anyone. And for the record, it doesn't need to be the bylaws. The law in New York State requires school boards to post their minutes within a certain time frame. And our legal can advise the board as a whole, but there is a law on the record, and that doesn't need to be the bylaws. And so procedurally, it does not precede New York State laws on the requirements of how we post our minutes. The public has a right to access those minutes, and they, just like they have an access to have a right to access our meetings. So that's all. No one, I didn't name any names. No one's being chastised. And I'm saying as the board, we as a body have a responsibility, not our staff, the board.
Yeah.
We're elected to uphold the law, and we take an oath to uphold the law.
Yeah, Vice President, and I also want to uphold that as well, because I don't think that in any way you were chastising, you were just making a statement according to the law, but that, you know, at the same point, you know, we've just been a demanding board. So I do thank you for those comments, Commissioner Powell, but in this case, I don't think that it was about chastisement, but just about making sure that we were adhering to the law, which we did not in this case. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Vice President LeBron, before you move on, I didn't realize that you were going to be virtual. I'm realizing that we do need a motion to suspend the
But we have a motion on the floor, so I was going to vote on the minutes and then
Well, the vote already went through it. You all voted already. It went through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There would need to be a motion to suspend the video conferencing policy.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for that, Kali. It was on my radar. With that, we're going to go right into the updated HR committee purpose. You should all have access through board docs, both a clean copy and the track changes on what that looks like. And so, in having a human resources previews meeting, these are the, 5 things that I would like this committee in the future to kind of have a better focus on. And that includes review monthly vacancy and hiring reports. So this committee, let me just say this too, this committee is going to be staggered, just like the finance committee. So we'll meet every other month, and finance will meet every other month. And when we don't meet, you will still get a report in the board business meeting. So just like this Thursday, when we meet, there was no finance meeting, you will still get the finance reports to review and ask questions, and there will still be a public presentation at the board business meeting regarding the finance report. And so the goal is that the same thing will happen with the human resources. We should be keeping an eye on vacancies and our hiring and what's going on and where we're at. And I know that our Chief of Human Resources tonight will be presenting some of those numbers tonight, but the goal is to have that as a monthly report for the board to know where we're at with vacancies across the district and every school by school. A review of the diversity pipeline initiatives. HR has presented a number of those initiatives verbally, but we want to make sure that we're also keeping track of how those initiatives are rolling out, how they're working or not working, and ensuring that what we intended for them to do, that is the outcome. And the only way to do that is by making sure that it is a monthly, regular review for this board. To also learn about HR practices and procedures, and Chris will go into some of that a little bit tonight, Dr. Miller. Develop policies related to personnel for consideration by the full board, and review employee recruitment and retention strategies. And I know this one has come up quite a bit around the district's, not only their recruitment, right, but what happens after people come into the district? How are we retaining our staff? How are we making sure that staff feel valued and appreciated and heard and supported? And I think that's a much bigger challenge for this board and this district as we move forward, but certainly one that we should be, intentionally focused on and not just give lip service to say we care, right? So like, what are those strategies? What do they look like? How are they being rolled out? And getting feedback as well from employees around those strategies. So does anybody have any questions in regards to the focus for the HR committee or feedback that they would like to add? And I can't see, so. President Elliott, if you can manage that piece.
I sure will, and I'll start off. I think the key thing for me is the learn about HR practices and procedures, because we have people that I hear in the community that can't get on the website. They feel that they're talked down to if they call in to ask about how to access the website. I understand that there was, when people have tried to access it, job descriptions are not there. And so there seems to be, even this week, you know, with a person who's trying to get back into the district, having some difficulty trying to get back in. It almost, and I'll say this to you, Dr. Miller, it almost seems as if we are, while we certainly have to align with what the requirements are, but the requirements seem to be a barrier. And so for people who want to come into our district to work, and even, not even on your leadership watch, but even previously, there have been people who have, and I'll say people of color specifically, who have not been able to work in this district, and they wanted to work in this district and had to go either out of state or either some school districts that are within the county. One other thing, Vice President, is well, I think it's here, employees recruitment and retention strategies. One of the things that I've heard as I've talked to some people who've left our district, because now what is happening is that the county is coming for diverse candidates, people of color candidates, and we sort of just let them go. We have not done a good job in retaining those things. We're the ones who have trained them, we're the ones who have supported them, and then we're gonna let some other district get the work that we've invested in. We've got to learn how to be aggressive in trying to retain our employees. And so I'd be interested as we move along in our meetings that we have discussions around how do we really aggressively retain our employees. Now, one of the things that I've heard is that I've asked, when I've heard that there are people who are leaving, one of the things I've asked is that, why are you leaving? And the response I've gotten is that nobody seemed to care whether I'll leave or not. So, you know, we've got to look at how do we address the fact that, you know, nobody is talking to staff who are leaving to find out why they're leaving and to see if we can retain them. So thank you, Vice President. Anybody else have any questions from the dais? No, okay.
So, for me, it's pretty much the same thing, but it just breaks down simply that we do exit interviews, and so we don't have to guess at why they're leaving. We can have it documented.
But some kind of way we've got to do it immediately when they determine that they're going to be leaving, so that it's not at the back end that we're trying to, you know, make sure we can retain them, but it's at the front end. Commissioner Simmons?
Yeah, I was going to say, if we're in the vein of discussing leaving, we have to make sure that we have an open ear to the feedback that we get, because there's a lot of compounded issues that our educators and staff members in the district, and that's from teachers to custodial to SSOs, what have you, are struggling with. So I think that in an effort to retain, just hearing them and being responsive to the needs that are expressed, as we know, could hopefully mitigate some of that.
The other, I'd also just add, and you know, we'll be able to talk about it on the retention and recruitment strategies. We got to get to the HBCUs, and as I looked at I think the chief's PowerPoint, I didn't see is it a pillar or whatever that's called, that really addressed that, unless I missed that. But I didn't see that we were aggressive about going to HBCUs. It seemed like we were only limiting ourselves within the county or the city area. And so we have to be real mindful about, you know, if we want to have a diverse staff population, that we look at places who, for that population, like HBCUs, and those specifically that have an education program. I remember Leslie Johnson talking about Dillard University. And so, we've got to, develop that. So I'll just leave that right here for right now. Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Adams?
Yeah, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I have to say this here. I also, when I look at HR, I just would like for the board's advocacy to mean something, because I got the message back that I'm not at the negotiating table, so I shouldn't be at, but our advocacy should mean something.
Mm-hmm.
And also in that clarity too, it is also how we vote for things. So sometimes it can be a contradicting message. So I think that, there is an understanding about advocacy, and there's been conversations that have been had. And I think people know that, if we're in the corner, but it's going to also show how we vote. Like how I vote will determine, am I putting my money where my mouth is?
I think we're covered, Vice President.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, for the exit interviews, one of the things we did ask HR to do is, as we're voting on resolutions for resignations, there is an attachment that shows just very broadly, like why individuals are leaving and where they're going. But I do think that we could probably have some further discussion with Dr. Miller around even having conversations around folks who are resigning and reviewing the exit interviews, maybe quarterly, or something to that effect in an executive session. Obviously, it would have to be an executive session, especially if we're talking about employees, and employees can also do them anonymously, but I do think it would be something better suited in executive session so that we can openly read them and even discuss certain individuals and why they felt that way, if they were comfortable with that. But I think that's something we can certainly look at exploring to expand as we move forward. And I'll probably have some conversations with Dr. Miller and Adrian, our legal counsel, to kind of explore to see how we can do those things, because the general attachment that we get now is very broad. It's, employees leaving to another district, employee got a better, wage position, but that doesn't really tell us around why, what culture that employee was experiencing at a specific school that led them to even seek other employment elsewhere. Because that's really why people leave organizations. It's usually the culture and the environment. And additional pay too. I want to put it out there that people are okay and should be able to negotiate and advocate for themselves for higher pay. So that should not be a reason, but I do find in this district, it's typically the culture of a school and the work environment that they're in. So again, I think that also ties into the retention strategies, right? And what we're doing to retain. And it doesn't require an exit interview to look at having some retention strategies. So that's what I hope we're able to accomplish out of this committee. If you have some ideas around these 5 additional pieces for the HR committee, feel free to email myself or and Dr. Miller together. We're going to be working on this together. And so anything he gets, I should get, and vice versa. In regards to the HR committee, if you have some other HR related feedback, you certainly can send it to Dr. Miller, but ensure that Dr. Peluso is copied in on those emails as well. And I'm sure that they will then share it with myself and President Elliott anyway as the board leadership, but I'll leave it at that. And if anybody has any
Madam Vice President, yeah. I got a couple of things that are brewing up, and I like to just put out also for us to consider.
Absolutely, go ahead.
Our own marketing strategy as a board, and what do I mean by that? So, for example, when I go out to the schools, one of the things I talk to young people about is coming back to Rochester, and in our case, being selfish, coming back into the district to teach. And so we've got to do that kind of, and I think Chief Lopez talked about this, that we've had at least three employees who have returned to our district to work who have graduated from our district, which is very exciting. I'm sure that there are probably more that have done the same thing. So I think that that's something that we have to look at in terms of our own, as a board, marketing strategy. And, do we really have, we need to look at our pipeline, our teacher pipeline for beginning to develop teachers. And somehow we need to put a marketing strategy out there that talks about teaching is a good field to be in. And I'm sure that we can get some support from the state around that as well. So I'm looking, for those conversations as well in terms of what we can do from our board lens to help to recruit. I'm even willing to go to the HBCUs to help to recruit, because you also have to have the passion about this work, and that while this work in the district is challenging and hard, it's good work. And so I think we have to be able to, have people who are out there who can communicate that it's hard work, but it's good work. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, President Elliott. So if everyone's okay with the purpose of this committee, I don't think we have to vote on it, but I just definitely wanted to have conversations with you all around what the scope and the purpose will be. And President Elliott, I hear you, and I'm going to make sure that that's part of the next agenda as we move forward. So next month, we'll just have a monthly report on the vacancies and where we're at. But the following month, we will have an HR committee, and I will make sure that that is part of the actual agenda for discussion first.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Malloy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to express how grateful I am to see this committee up and running again and meeting so often. I think it was necessary, and so thank you for your leadership on this, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go. Thank you.
Commissioner Powell also has a question, Vice President.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Commissioner Powell?
I would like for us to have a vote on the purpose of the committee. I think it would set a bad precedent to change the charge of the committee without the full input from the board. And I would like to move that we adopt this committee purpose.
I'm fine with that. I don't know if there's
Second.
language for is there a motion?
I've got it, no problem. The motion was made by, sorry? Oh, Commissioner Powell? Mm-hmm. And seconded by President Elliott. Okay.
Yeah, so Vice President, in terms of discussion, that may be where we, I don't know, while we're moving that and we've seconded, we may want to, revise some of the language in that.
Well, the vote's on the floor now, so if you have language you want to add, I'm open to it.
Yeah, well, you know what, we had a lot of discussion around it. I guess part of, let me just say to Commissioner Powell, because we've had a lot of conversation around it, I'm going to ask Commissioner Powell if perhaps we can come back at the next meeting and put the motion on the floor once we get language based on the conversation that we've had this evening that would be included in the purpose. So would you be willing to withdraw the motion until the following, we meet in November again?
The next meeting, but I'm not, it's not clear to me, President Elliott, what else would folks want to add, like, in the scope of it? Under, like, practices too, even retention and recruitment, it doesn't need to specifically have all the strategies out there, but the notion that we have some strategies, and they'll be discussed through the agenda, and then we'll be monitoring it through this committee as a body as a whole.
Yeah, so we're all clear about, with this conversation that we just had, that all of that conversation is contained within the purpose? Is that what you're saying, Commissioner?
I believe that should be the case.
Okay, all right, well, let's go ahead.
I believe it to be the case, but President Elliott, I will make sure it's part of our agenda at the next, full meeting that we have in November, because I do think that part of what we do sometimes is have conversations, and then the follow-up, it doesn't get onto an agenda, and then we're not monitoring it.
Yeah.
But we should be monitoring all of these things. So I will make sure that's part of the next meeting's agenda.
All right, I support it then.
Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Kali, I can't see if it
Captured
passes.
7-0.
All right, thank you. And so up next in that spirit, I'm going to have Dr. Miller come and present the monthly vacancy update and district staffing and recruitment and what was done. And I just want to put this out there that although this is a presentation, we are still going to continuously work on modifying a report that makes sense and that anybody can pick up and read. You already know how I feel. Nobody should require a degree to understand what we're talking about, the information that we put out, how to read it and understand it. And so this is our first report, but if you have suggestions on how it should be modified, certainly please, again, send feedback because we are going to be working on a monthly report that makes sense for everyone, public especially. So with that, I'm turning it over to Dr. Miller.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President LeBron, President Elliott, and Commissioners and Superintendent Peluso. I'm excited by your comments and your feedback and appreciate that because you raise voice to things that are important for us to focus on. And your voices also help to ensure that we can realize the work. And you are very well in tune with where we need to go, obviously, because you're in touch with our stakeholders. But more than that, your attention on human capital work will help move that. So thank you for that. I appreciate the opportunity that we can focus on this work as a district. And because we have systems, processes, and mindsets across the district that we really need to work on. And some of the mindsets can be the challenging things that we need to tackle. So your voice helps to set, through your leadership, how we can change those mindsets. So thank you for that. So tonight, as we've been sharing, right, we've been talking about vacancies. And a vacancy is an unoccupied position. It's an empty space, right? It's an unfilled position. So when we talk about vacancies, we're talking about positions that are unfilled. And I think at times, and what we need to go deeper into, and we will be next month when you get the reports, are how are we filling vacancies? And we've talked before that we fill vacancies sometimes with emergency hires or long-term substitutes, or we fill them with temporary staff. So what we want to be able to do is provide greater clarity for when we're doing that. But when we've filled a position, it's no longer a vacancy. So the data we've been speaking to, and we've been really focused, and I'll remind you what the numbers were like in the summer, we were really focused on filling jobs. And filling jobs with people that are committed, excited, working in the field of education, working in urban education. Those are the people that we're looking for, people that are committed to our city, committed to our children, right? We're not just hiring anyone. We want to hire people that want to be here, that want to do this work, that want to grow, and that want to build a career in the Rochester City School District. That's our purpose. And we want to support those people. So as you look at this slide, you still see that we still have some vacancies that we're working on. And we've had, all school districts, locally in the county, regionally, and across the state and across the nation, have been struggling. We in the field of education have been struggling to grow future educators and develop them. And so we've seen that some of our surrounding districts have recruited some of our teachers for various reasons, right? That people leave us. We can share more reasons and deeper data about why people leave. So we started the year with positions filled, and then people may resign because they got picked up by a suburb that was also struggling to fill jobs. And they're committed to, or they're supposed to give a 30-day notice before they leave. So we have experienced some resignations, not any more than we would experience in any other recent year. But you can see the data there. What we need to do, and what we'll be doing next month, is reporting deeper in how those positions were filled. We'll also be reporting out to you diversity data. What was our hiring? What what have we experienced relative to race? What have we experienced relative to gender? What does that look like over the past year? So we'll be sharing data on that as well. And so tonight I'm going to share some of our efforts and plans, and we need to develop and grow our future staff, right? We cannot rely right now on just colleges. We have to go elsewhere. We have to leave the local area to recruit. We also have to grow our own. And so those are efforts that we need to do. So really focused on ensuring we filled all of our jobs so that we had no vacancies. And right away, we need to be really focused as the school year started on retention, right? Everyone needs to be focused on, okay, we've filled jobs. How are we going to support all the staff that we've hired to ensure that they're successful? And as I've shared this wheel many times, we all have an ability to impact recruitment and retention. Everyone in this room, everyone in this district, everyone in this community, how we talk, how we act, what we do, our mindsets, it all has an impact on how we recruit and retain. And so each one of us can have that impact. This summer, we saw how all sorts of people helped us recruit. Everyone in this room, lots of people, probably lots of people watching right now, helped us recruit, right? It was a full effort by a lot of people. The same effort needs to be put into how we retain people. We all can support each other, colleague to colleague, leader to leader, central office to schools. We all can impact that. So I call on everyone, right? Just as we called on everyone to help us with recruitment, help us with retention. Be that support your colleague, support each other, share good news, highlight those things. It helps. So with that, the Office of Human Capital is working on its systems, processes, and mindsets, right? We are in recovery mode. We have struggled. We are rebuilding. We are working to improve our systems, processes, and mindsets, and we're making changes, and we're still in that process. And we know that when we talk to leadership, when we talk to teachers, we talk to unions, when we talk to you as commissioners, we know we have work to do, and we're working to address those things. We are still hiring, right? We actually were recruiting this past weekend. We were at Rock the Block that was at the East Campus. We were at the public market. We're still hiring, we're still recruiting, and it's our intent to continue to go to recruitment events all year because recruitment is continuous, it's all year long. When we started the summer, just to remind us, this is where we were, right? This wasn't even at the start. This was on July 22nd. And we know that we had a lot of work to do as a school district, as a school community, and so many people put forth great effort to ensure that we could fill positions, and everyone deserves credit for that. There were some specific actions that we took through the support of the board, through the use of ARP monies. At the end of June, we added 3 recruiters, and they couldn't have come at a better time to help us to be out in the community and to help people in the community find work. And as President Elliott pointed out, we still have some work to do in that effort. Knowing that we have recruiters still right now, and they're going to have the whole year to work on those efforts, we should see some significant improvements there. We also, through Vice President LeBron's support and advocacy, really shifted mindsets to ensure we were providing a service to community, to ensure that we were out in the community, meeting people where they were to help them find employment. We worked with employment agencies, we worked with temporary staff agencies to help us fill positions, and we're still in that place. And we're shifting, right? We don't want to hire temporary staff. We don't want to use employment agencies. We want to grow our own. So I was talking with RAP today, the RAP union, about how we could create that pathway to help paras move into teaching assistant positions and how we could support those paras to become teaching assistants, which is a career ladder opportunity where they can receive better pay, and how we can help them to fill those needs. We also need to ensure, and we did, that we're constantly looking at staffing to ensure that we're using staff the best possible way as connected to student enrollment. The Board of Education really helped us with fast-tracking start dates for new hires by temporarily allowing us through the rest of the year to actually start people without the board vote, right? So that they could get immediately started, and that had a positive impact in getting people into schools. We created an electronic new hire recommendation process so that recommendations from directors or principals were made electronically. They were in a system that could be monitored by me and by others, and also then followed up, and we could monitor how quickly we were turning around offers to candidates. And we were aiming for a 24-hour turnaround. The volume of what we dealt with was pretty significant, and we weren't able to achieve that, but that's where we want to be. If somebody's recommended for hire, we want to get them an offer and get that to them within the next day. We partnered with community-based organizations. We hired retirees who were no longer limited by the salary cap relative to collecting their pension. It was a cap of $35,000. The state removed that for this year. That enabled us to hire people and to bring good people back into the Rochester City School District. We added temporary resources. I didn't talk to the board about this previously, but we hired temporarily 3 retired principals to help us in the Office of Human Capital. 2 of those retired principals did nothing but make offers to people. We probably made about 500 offers this summer. Now, not every offer was accepted. People got better offers, or they considered their options. It used to be that you would make an offer to a teacher, you'd pick up the phone, you'd talk to them, you've got this job, and they would accept it, get you back that offer letter within an hour, within minutes, right? It's not the case anymore. People want to truly, deeply understand their compensation, their benefits. They want to understand other things about the district. And so instead of a quick phone call, it's a 20, 30-minute phone call. And instead of saying this offer is only valid for 24 hours, which is what we used to do, it's, can I have the weekend to think about this? Or I'm waiting on another interview and the results of that process. Can I have until this date? And that's what we had to do. We had to give people more time, but more than that, we had to spend time with them. So we had some retired principals who were the perfect people to be able to do that, but that's all they did. And we had them working throughout the summer to assist us. We are in the process of developing talent ambassadors. President Elliott wants to visit HBCUs. We want to train people to be talent ambassadors. And it's not people in the Office of Human Capital. It's how can we find people that attended HBCUs in the Rochester City School District so that they can go back to where they graduated from and recruit, because they know our district, they know what it's like to work day to day in our schools, and then they also know that college that they graduated from. So how can we identify, develop, and send those folks to help us with the recruitment, because they're going to be the best people to do that. We pivoted throughout the summer. When something wasn't working and there were multiple things that just weren't in the right response, we pivoted so that we could change. The volume of what we were dealing with called on us to create changes, and we did throughout the summer. The Office of Safety and Security really created a pipeline training program, an internal program to build our own sentries and ensure that people were hired quickly and at better pay. We worked with the Bente Union to affect that, and that resulted, we started the summer with 66 sentry vacancies. We have every school covered. We have 2 vacancies as of last Wednesday that were still being filled, but they were at schools with multiple sentries, but all schools are covered, and that hasn't been the case previously. We also looked at salary step increases for hard to fill teaching vacancies. We utilized what was in the contract, right? Sometimes we put limits on ourselves, but we utilized what was in the contract to be competitive, and that helped us to recruit and bring in teachers from other school districts and from charter schools specifically, because we were competitive, and we used the contract to ensure that we could do that. We also hired emergency long-term substitutes to ensure that we could fill the gaps. There are simply not enough teachers graduating from colleges to fill our needs. The state education department has talked about this. Almost on the daily, if you were, you could find articles from all sorts of media talking about this issue that, by the way, isn't going away, right? We need a long-term state and national strategy to address the teaching shortage. There is a marked teacher shortage, and there is not yet a solid strategy at the state or national level. And so I think we need advocacy to ensure that we can realize those things. As I mentioned, it was teamwork, right? You see our 3 recruiters and a couple people from the Office of Human Capital in this image. You see principals and an assistant principal, right? Everybody worked together to meet our needs, and we need to continue that spirit and that effort. And I talk to my team about our work, that in central office we exist to support schools. There is no more important client that we serve in central office than a principal, right? We all serve students and they're the most important. But when it comes to staff, serving principals and meeting their needs, and we still have work to do in that area, but the partnership with principals is a critical one. Again, recruitment and retention is something we all need to be focused on. And so we have right now between 120 and 150 emergency hires that we made, right? When we talk about filling vacancies, we hired some folks who are not yet fully certified. And other districts locally, in the Big Five and elsewhere, have had to do this as well. Yesterday, we had a CIT meeting, our Career and Teaching Program. We have 355 new teachers receiving support through the Career and Teaching Program, which places a mentor with each of those 355 teachers to ensure that they're cared for, valued, helped, and assisted with their teaching. And they shared stories about their successes and the energy and the excitement that they're getting from these new teachers that we as a district have hired. And so of those 355, the great majority are certified in the assignment that they're hired for. There are others who are certified in another assignment. So for example, we hired a social studies certified teacher to assist in a special education classroom, to teach in a special education classroom. Now, we can work with that social studies certified teacher to get certified in special education. The state has a whole series of certificate opportunities that we need to work with people at an individual level to support them with finding a path to certification in the appropriate area. When I graduated from college, I went to Nazareth. It used to be that there was a provisional teaching certificate and then a permanent teaching certificate. There are a lot more teaching certificates that exist. A residency certificate, an internship certificate, a supplementary certificate, a transitional A, B, C, G, right? So we have people who are not certified in the right areas, so how can we work with them to get certification in the right area? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. We have people that have submitted their certification application to the New York State Education Department, and it's under review. Sometimes that can take 3 to 6 months to get final word on, and so we have people that are in the queue with the State Education Department. We also have people that we've hired that are eligible for an internship certificate because they're more than 50% through their teaching certification program. They may not know that. That's why we need to work with people at an individual level to guide them, support them, and to help them with the certification. And we're also, by the way, helping our mentors understand these different pathways that the State Education Department has created. We have other folks that are certified outside of New York State, and we've hired them, and we need to help them with getting reciprocity to get a certificate that way. We also have folks that could apply for a transitional cert, and we have other folks that are in a teaching program and they're not yet 50% through, but they're committed to working with us. They're going to graduate, they're going to get across that finish line, and those are the kinds of people we want to ensure we can retain and grow. And then there are some people who are not even yet enrolled in a certification program, kind of as a last resort for us to hire. And so it's my intent right, for us, what are we going to do to support these people? That's what's in the blue column. We're going to have an individual certification status meeting with each of these people. And we've already started that. On the next slide, you'll see an example of the template of that. That is our Teacher Certification Action Plan, a TCAP, so that we are clear, the teacher is really clear, their mentor is really clear, and that they actually have a plan that we can support so that we can ensure that this precious captive resource that we have working in our schools gets fully certified. And we're being competitive because we're seizing these people now, and it's our goal to retain them and to build a career for them in the Rochester City School District. We also are working to develop a professional development course, because if someone hasn't fully completed their teaching work, we want to ensure that any gaps that might exist are filled. When you are in your undergraduate program for teaching, you take 21 credits in education, right? That's essentially 7 college courses, right? So there's a gap that we want to ensure we can fill with people that may not have yet fulfilled their teaching program. We want to differentiate support, because some people we've hired have been teaching for 8 or 9 years in a charter school and they're not yet fully certified, right? Great that we grab them. Let's help them get fully certified, but the types of supports we provide them versus someone else are going to be far different. We know that our schools have coaches and interventionists and principals and assistant principals and others that are helping. They're in classrooms, they're visiting, they're giving feedback, they're sharing and exchanging lessons and ideas. That is an important piece. We're also exploring rapid certification programs that exist. There are programs like that, MCC, Roberts Wesleyan, and other local institutes of higher learning that will work with our candidates to help them get certification quicker. And so we need to help identify what programs fit which people and then help them get into it and cross the finish line. And then we also want to offer self-paced professional development resources that are training videos and otherwise that can assist people with being successful in the classroom. And so on this slide, you see just an example of what the Teacher Certification Action Plan looks like. We're prohibited as a school district from hiring people that aren't fully certified. And so we're hiring them on an emergency hire basis to fulfill our needs. We can't start the school year. We can't have a school year with vacant classrooms, right? The candidates just don't exist. We had to fill. So now we're shifting to how can we grow, develop, support these people to be fully certified, but we need them to fully understand that we expect them to be certified. We need them to be certified. We will support and work with them to be certified. And so having this TCAP will ensure there's great clarity about what is still missing or needed and what we can do as a district to help them. It's my intent that once we have all the data after these individual meetings with people, that we may need to advocate for some more resources or more support, right? And that maybe we need to ask for use of ARP monies to help people get across those finish lines, right, with certification. And this isn't going away, right? This is something we're going to be dealing with, I would imagine, for the next 5 to 10 years, unless there's some significant turnaround at the state or national level that makes it easier and more compelling to be a teacher. Because right now, there is no strategy to do that. And so we are left to grow our own and to grow our future workforce. And so what I've just shared with you is how we're trying to do that. Now, this isn't the best and only way, but this is one of the ways that we're dealing with right now. I also want to share with you that next month there will be some amendments to appointments, because there were some people that got appointed as probationary that shouldn't be appointed as probationary, so we're going to correct that next month. That's part of our audit review that we're doing right now, and so there'll be some amendments around that. Most important, and I kind of said this a few different ways, all the 355 teachers that we've got right now that are with a mentor and that we've hired, we really need to be focused on retaining them and keeping them, ensuring that they're successful. So all the supports I mentioned already, in addition to that, we need to ensure that we're giving them feedback informally and formally. We need to ensure that they get evaluation feedback, and we need to grow and retain them. And with some of them, if they're not in a place where we need them to be, we may have to make some decisions about exiting them at the end of the year, right? We have to have a standard for what we expect and what we need in our classrooms. We want to see people making progress. We want to see them making forth good effort, accessing the supports that we're providing them through CIT and otherwise, the mentoring that they receive. We want to ensure that they can get their certification and they can build a career in life with us in the Rochester City School District. There are barriers to recruiting on this slide. I'm not going to read it, but there are definitely barriers to recruitment and retention. And you mentioned some of them in your initial feedback. We need a strategy for those barriers. We need to change processes, systems, and mindsets largely. And we need help at the state and national level to change how we grow and develop teachers, not only in our district, but in all districts. And so these buckets or pillars speak to some of the things that our strategy needs to include. And so you've approved residency program development, and we're building residency programs with University of Rochester, Nazareth College, and the New York University, NYU, so that over the next 5 years, we want to see 275 teachers over the next 5 years come through those programs. We help them with tuition, we link them to the district, they commit to stay and work with us, and they're grown through our efforts. Over time, we want to see more teachers come through residency programs and those pipelines. We want to add pipelines, right? I mentioned 3 institutes of higher education. Over the next couple of years, I'd like to see us add more, right? We don't want to have all our efforts in just those 3 institutes, but let's try to get in more institutes. Stronger teacher recruitment. We want to improve our strategies and our operations to ensure that we can recruit highly qualified, diverse candidates. And that does include, and maybe we can call it out more explicitly, visiting other locations in the country, HBCUs specifically. I do need to share that lots of school districts are doing that though. And so how does Rochester, how do we as a community be attractive that would cause someone who lives in the South or elsewhere to want to move to Rochester, right? It's a community piece, right? How do we make Rochester welcoming? How do we create supports that people want to come here? More to the point, finding people to return back because they're from Rochester. How can we get people to return back to where they're from? And in addition to that, how can we partner with the United College Fund, right? At all colleges and universities, people of color make benefit of scholarships from the United College Fund. How can we partner with them so that we're hitting more than just the HBCUs, but we're attracting from all sorts of colleges and universities? We want to ensure that we're providing strong supports to schools. We have work to do there. We want to create teacher leadership roles that help keep teachers in the classroom, and there are models for that, right? How can we look at maybe reducing the number of teachers on special assignment who are fully out of the classroom, and how can we create hybrid models? That's what a lot of successful school districts have done, and that's something that we're interested in exploring. And then lastly, how can we engage with partners across the city and locally to grow and develop? So those are some of the key levers that we want to implement and work on. And certainly your feedback at the start of the meeting, and I'm sure you'll have more feedback now, will help to push us. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Miller, for your presentation. And I have some questions and comments and feedback, but I do want to open up the floor to commissioners. And I'm actually going to call on Commissioner Malloy because I see her hand up on the Zoom first. And then I also want to ask Dr. Jallo if she has any feedback or questions that she wants to add because we're all on Zoom, and then I'll go to those on the floor. So Commissioner Malloy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I think I may have missed this, Dr. Miller, in the presentation. You had mentioned something regarding hybrid models and how some districts are going towards this. Can you explain that? Just because, do you mean like online learning versus in classroom learning? I missed what you said on that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's good point to clarify. No, hybrid in terms of teacher leadership. So what some other school districts have done is that instead of a teacher being full-time released for a special assignment, they extend their reach through part-time teaching, part-time leadership, right? So that we don't lose them from teaching. Some teachers don't want to leave the classroom. They don't want to leave working with students. So it's attractive. And some districts offer stipends for that teacher because they're taking on additional work while still teaching. So there's models out there. Obviously, this would need to be something that we talk in a deep and meaningful way with our partners at the RTA. But there are other models out there that we should look at and explore.
Is this also related, would you say, the hybrid teaching that you mentioned, to our teachers on special assignment that we currently have throughout the district? Is it similar?
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't mean hybrid teaching. I mean, you teach, in some elementary schools, a teacher teaches math to 3 sections, and then the rest of her day, she's coaching, right? At the high school level, it could be similarly. So it's a way to extend someone's reach, have a bigger impact, still stay in the classroom with kids, and maybe earn additional compensation for doing all of that, instead of pulling somebody out full-time and not having any connection or direct connection and service to students.
Okay, so do our TOSAs they don't currently have, I know TOSA is sort of a leadership role for teachers within our district. Do they currently not have access to the classroom or to students then, the way that we have it?
I wouldn't say that they don't have access, but our teachers on special assignment are largely full-time doing the special assignment.
I think Commissioner Malloy froze Dr. Miller. If she ends up joining again and she wants to flush out the rest of her, feedback and questions, then we'll open the floor for her to do that. I just want to add to that comment, though, Dr. Miller, just for those listening, our teachers on assignment are essentially doing other work. They're not in the classrooms, and this has come up before. I would be very open to exploring other models that I know that other agencies and organizations that collect data across the country have shown that there are other models that allow new teachers to get the support from experienced and great teachers while co-teaching with them, versus the model of having a teacher leader being pulled out, some of our very best being pulled out of a classroom, not having students just because they're doing leadership, and then throwing in brand new teachers to some of the most difficult, challenging classes. And there are models that are out there that show that you can have your very best and brightest teachers, and yes, you pay them because it is additional work for them to still be teaching and coaching, but they co-teach with new staff. And so that they have periods where they may be, co-teaching for half the day versus being pulled out of the entire classroom. So I would love to explore that further with the data that's out there and models that are much more effective, especially when we're talking about retention of new teachers. No new teacher should just be thrown, out there by themselves without the support other than having a mentor outside. It is something valuable in having a second adult in that classroom to help you and model what best practices looks like in terms of teaching. And I don't think that we necessarily have that down right now with the current model that we have. So Dr. Jallo, I'm going to turn it over to you. I see that you came on camera. Thank you for that.
Sure. Good evening. So I just had a few questions. I wanted to know, do you have data to show where the uncertified teachers were placed? That would be interesting to see the impact of a proportion or a percentage of uncertified teachers and the impact it might have on that school and that school's ability to perform. So I don't know if you have an answer to that or if that kind of data is available. And also all the uncertified teachers or teachers teaching out of their certification, do they all have mentors or do just 300 of them have mentors?
Yeah, so your last question, yes, we've matched a mentor up with all of them to ensure that they're getting mentoring. We're also going to ensure that they're all evaluated and that they're coached. So that's one. One of the lessons we learned from this summer was the nuance of, right, on the one slide, and I'm sorry these aren't numbered, on the slide where I listed all the types of certification, what we need in our system is to capture those data better, right? Because there are people that don't have certification at this moment, in part because they're waiting for it, it's pending at the state. Others can apply for certification and they don't know that they can apply because they don't know that a certain type of certification exists. So that's why we need to meet with people individually to give them the guidance. When we collect information that's self-reported, people don't always know, and so rather than share inaccurate data, we're meeting individually with people to help them so that we can get a clarity on that. And it would be my hope to be able to share a report next month that is more detailed. What I'd like to do is to show you the numbers in each of those bullets on that slide so that we can say, okay, here's where all those people fit, and this is what we're doing with them, right? And this is when we anticipate they'll be fully certified, like month and year when that's going to be. So that's the data that we're building. It does require the individual care and support. It also requires us to spend some time with all of our principals, assistant principals, and mentors, which there are many, right? So that they fully understand. I mentioned, this is my 23rd year. I mentioned when I graduated, there were only 2 certificates that I knew of, provisional and permanent, right? I do think that many people in our organization do not know the differences and the intricacies and the variations, because the state has afforded many new types of certificates in recent years. So we have to educate, we have to mentor, we have to work with people individually. So next month, my aim would be to provide those data with greater clarity.
Great, okay.
Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, that's good. I just have one more quick question, because we talk so much about hiring more teachers of color. Is there data that disaggregates your hires maybe for the last 60 days or 90 days? And how many teachers of color did we actually hire during that time or currently have in the school system? Was there a significant change in that regard?
That I'll be doing. I'm actually going to do a look back on all of last year, because we look back, but I like your idea of also like looking the last 90, 60, 30. We should be able to do that. And so when I share those reports, we'll do that. It's one of the things that we experienced this summer. We had a lot of different hands in the pot in terms of helping to get people hired. And so we are auditing all of our data right now because we've found some data errors and data entry because we had lots of new people and people supporting. So we're going through everything really carefully because the last thing we want to do is report inaccurate data. So next month we would aim to have all those types of data.
So last question, I promise. Where the district is in the process of updating to Oracle, or updating their Oracle system. If Oracle is up and running, what will that mean for you in HC, to have a system that is updated? What will that mean for you? How will that change your work life and the results coming out of your office? Because we keep talking about it, but sometimes we fail to make the connection of how it might actually be a benefit to different departments throughout the district. And I know I'm assuming there's going to be an impact on your division.
Yeah, I love that you asked that question. About a year ago, I think I spoke to the board and I used the example of my cell phone. Imagine if you were using the same cell phone you had in 2011 today, right? And what you could or couldn't do. PeopleSoft hasn't been updated since then, right? And so it's really limited in terms of what we're able to pull from it. We don't have data dashboards. We don't have, I should be able to, and with Oracle, I should be able to log in and immediately see a whole host of data that right now I gotta take somebody off their job and spend hours just to. There was a period of time for 2 weeks in January this past year where we were really concerned about COVID spread. just figuring out our daily attendance was taking somebody 3 hours to really get an accurate data every day, so that we had to do that. So when we have Oracle, we should have a data dashboard with our key performance indicators. So in an instant, I don't got to click anything. I can just open it and I can see all sorts of things. How long are jobs staying unfilled? How long is it taking to fill jobs? What's our absent rate today, right? Like with a click and just an open. We don't have that capability right now. And data integrity, right? We've talked about, I think, at this level in all sorts of ways, right? Ensuring our data are accurate. We need to verify and audit data because we don't want to share data wrong. But Oracle will ensure that there's data integrity, that data is really clean, and that it's instantaneously provided. We just don't have that capability right now. And I'll share that it's a struggle. It's an honest struggle, right? I think you hear that from me, and it impacts what we do. It impacts what we know and how we can hold our system accountable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jallo, and thank you, Dr. Miller. Commissioner Malloy, I know that you got cut off, and I didn't know if you had any follow-up or additional remarks, and I said I would offer that to you if you got back on.
Thank you. I think the question I was asking at the time, and apologies, I don't know what happened to my internet. I just got booted out suddenly. I just wanted to know if the current TOSAs that we have in our district are engaging in leadership opportunities.
Yes, I think all of our teachers on assignment, right? It's a career path to to step many of our principals have taken, or assistant principals. So we do consider them to all be in leadership roles as teacher leaders, and they play important roles. Yes.
And I guess just the last thing was, do we see many of those same TOSAs then going into the administrative track in our district later on?
I think we need to similarly do deep dive in that. I was just sharing some data on our Rock Urban Leadership Program and the cohorts that have done that, and whether folks who went through that are teacher leaders or leaders. So yeah, we need to do some more analysis on that as well. Teacher leadership, right? There are many teachers who do not want to be principals or assistant principals, and they want to stay closely connected to kids in the way that they're working, right? That's a way for us to retain people, is to have opportunities where they can both continue to work with students and have an impact and influence on other adults.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Commissioners on the dais, I cannot see President Elliott. I'm going to have you make the call. Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Adams?
First, I'd like to thank you for the information on TCAP, because a lot of stuff that's been whispered in my ear that answered it for me. Also, I'm happy to hear that you're going to be giving out data on race and gender. I would have been even more happier if you had gave out that data on those 355. And maybe next time that you report, you could have that data. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, President Elliott. I'm also interested in the data that Commissioner Adams just spoke on. In addition to the race and gender, I would love to see subject matter by school and by grade. Because when I'm listening to this, I want to acknowledge, first of all, the valiant effort that has been made to fill the vacancies. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially with the void that we have. And it's not something that's within our control completely. So I definitely want to acknowledge that. But I think about the long-term ramifications on learning when we talk about lack of certification and what it means to fill an actual vacancy when we say that we're using emergency hires, long-term subs, and temporary staff. And it's something that had to happen because we cannot have kids come into a classroom where there's no one there. But then you think about expertise, and so I'm probably all over the place, but when I think of certification, getting a certification is not necessarily equivalent to the, certification is necessary, but there's also skill, experience, and passion. So there was an example used about a social studies teacher who may be filling in for special education. Well, those are two very different things, and a certification for special ed looks completely different. I know you know. And so I'm hoping we're not getting certifications on the basis of technically we need to be certified in this area, but the passion isn't there, because that translates in the classroom as well. So those are, again, the long-term ramifications on learning for our students concerns me. And so I would like to know what those certifications look like. Hey, we've got X amount of math certifications that are still outstanding. These are the schools and these are the grade levels impacted, and how that translates and what the plans are for that.
Thank you, and I'll go next. I got a few things, but I first of all want to, Dr. Miller, thank you, and again, thank Vice President for all this aggressive work that has been done around recruitment, and also want to thank your team, because you all have gone over and beyond the call of duty and been creative at locations to recruit from. And so, and we got to get out there to the people, and the Vice President knows that very, very well. And I also want to, in the presentation, you mentioned about Roberts Wesleyan and U of R and another school as the primary institutions to recruit from. I would change that your HBCUs are your number one priority of schools to recruit from, because with those schools, we may be getting some of the same, and we're trying to make some changes in the district. And I'd also like to say, there's this push around certification, but just because you're certified doesn't mean you qualify. That's what I say. It doesn't mean you're qualified, because with all the certified teachers and others that we have in this district, if that was the case, we should be far along in academic achievement than we are. So it includes, additional skill sets and resources in order to be able to be successful in this district. A couple other things that I would also say, I know you mentioned about there are former employees who are retirees that are able to return, and so I think that may be a good resource. I've already talked to a couple of returning, well, at least one, and I know of some others who have returned it to the district, and so that's a great opportunity, I believe, because I think the learning curve may be be lower if we're going to those retirees. But I will also say that as we go out to try to recruit, that it may not be about money alone. So even if we're talking about higher salaries, and we may not be able to pay, be as competitive in terms of money, but some people just want to do this work. And that's what we also have to use as a marketing strategy as well. I mean, just look at us as board members. We don't get paid that much, but we're here doing this work, and so it cannot be solely about, an increase in salary. And I guess I'm somewhat surprised to hear that in terms of when an offer is given, that we're only giving them 24 hours and we're not giving them maybe a weekend or a couple of days to be able to think about that. So I'm surprised about that. I also want to also suggest, you talked about the lack of teachers and what that may be like in 5-10 years, and so I'm thinking too that that's going to lead to more independent learning, and I think somewhere down the line we may have to look at offering. I'll say that and I'll turn to the superintendent for that, but somewhere down the line, and I have said, even in terms of our facilities modernization project, that we may not have the need for as much brick and mortar. And then here comes COVID. And so we're finding that, we're having a lot of online learning. But I would, from this, and I'll say this to my colleagues, that in the future, we may have to look at what more independent learning looks like. And I just happened to see, in fact, I wrote an article on this during, I think, my last campaign or the campaign before. There is an increase of homeschooling in the Black community. And so I just saw that Rochester has a Black homeschooling community. Didn't realize that really exists as a unit. And so there are other opportunities out there, and we're just going to have to stay abreast and begin to think differently about what education looks like, because, you know, you all have done a yeoman's job in bringing in people to serve our students and families. But, you know, at some point, we may have to look at, you know, in addition to putting that kind of energy in there, in this effort, we may also have to look at, you know, putting energy in other kinds of education for our children. So I'll leave it for there, but thank you again for all of the effort. Any questions down on my right? Commissioner Powell?
No, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah. Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, I took a few notes here. And an effort to save time, I have many questions, but I'm going to, for clarification purposes relative to the hiring practices or hiring practice that we just went through, but I'm going to have them posted in the Q log, you know, just to save time. And some have already been responded to and answered to, and in your PowerPoint presentation also. So thank you for that. You mentioned the United College Fund, and I think you meant to say United Negro College Fund, unless it's changed over time, and I just don't have any knowledge of that. So I think that's what you
Yes, sir.
meant by that. Okay, and you know, last but not least, you know, you're looking for us to help you with certain things. So I took a note here. Having a contract settled with teachers would go a long way to help with attracting and retaining teachers. So I think that if we would move toward that, that might be an incentive, you know, for either teachers to stay or teachers to come. So you yourself mentioned, you know, ways that we could help. So I would hope that would, you know, be an idea.
Just one other thing to Commissioner Patterson's point that brought up something. We did have a relationship with United Negro College Fund under, can't think of his name right now.
Harry Kennedy?
Yeah,
Harry
Harry
Kennedy?
Kennedy.
Who?
Harry Kennedy.
Harry, yes.
Yeah.
I thought you all said Eric. Yeah. Yes, under Harry Kennedy. So you may want to reach out to him, you know, around that. That's it. Thank you, Commissioner, Vice President LeBron. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I just have a couple of points, Chris. So first and foremost, I do want to thank you and your team again, but I would be remiss if I did not formally thank Senator Jeremy Cooney. And I know I mentioned this, but really, you know, invaluable in trying to support us in these efforts. He was one of the first calls I made around getting connected to the Mercantile, and he was immediately like, yes. And so I do want to thank the Mercantile, specifically Ken Green and Sean Brooks, for working with you and I, not knowing us from a hole in the wall, and just an email and an introduction from Jeremy, and being super supportive to us and all of the vendors that are there. And of course, the Rochester Education Foundation, Dr. Shanae Lee, and her efforts as well, and her support, as well as all the staff who came down to assist, and not just with, you know, interviewing, but even just helping folks have some direction of where to go. Like we went from no advertisement to getting around 25 to 30 people to just blowing up with hundreds of people, more than we could handle in the very beginning, but very thankful for this community as well for stepping up. So kudos to the Rochester community for spreading the word and letting people know that we were doing these open hirings. I do want to point out a few things though, and I have taken lots of notes from everyone's feedback, and including Dr. Jallows, and Chris, you and I can meet to discuss what the report will look like, and come up with a good solid draft as we move forward, and then modifying it as we need to. But I do think there's so much value in separating, you know, school by school, certified, uncertified, vacant, not vacant. But this effort also was so that we could start school better prepared and more staffed, which also directly ties into school climate and school safety. That was an issue last year where we had a number of shortages, and that does present some unsafe situations sometimes for our staff when they're trying to juggle multiple roles and positions, but they're only one person. But with that, I want to point out, and you briefly did mention it in the beginning, that we also need to be mindful of what these vacancies look like and whether they're in, people are in the positions through temp agencies or actually filling the position, because, my goal is that we fill the position and not, and reduce our dependency on a temporary agency, although I appreciate their efforts to help us get adults, in front of kids. Again, it does lead to better school safety and climate. However, there's so much value for this district and for our students in having permanent adults that are trained and know our students and know their stories and built relationships with them. And that for me, I think, is going to be one of the biggest pieces that as we move forward is ensuring that the vacancies and the positions are filled by full-time employees of RCSD versus through a temp agency. So I will be looking at that data and requesting that for the board to have as well, so that we are aware, out of 30 positions, if 26 are filled by tests, then that ties back into looking at our recruitment and retention efforts to ensure that they're full-time employees of RCSD and part of a collective bargaining unit, because that's the reality that we have collective bargaining units in many of our positions. And then the last thing, just two extra more things. You mentioned, the role of central office supporting the schools, and I just want to uplift that that's really the role of the board as well. In that regard, is that we're there to support our principals and our staff, but we're not there to give them direction or tell them what to do or how to do their job. So I just would be remiss if I didn't put that on record. I know that has come up. And to some degree, it is a human resources matter, and to others, it's a fine line because we're elected officials, but at the flip side of this, our role is really to support schools. And I do also believe that that is the role of central office as well. Central office exists to support schools. And for a long time, it's been top down versus this equal, shared leadership model. And I hope that as we move forward, we continue to look at how central office supports schools, including, human capital, and how the board can also support that work for you, Chris. And lastly, the paying for the required fees. I'm glad you mentioned that. I am very interested in figuring out how do we use ARP dollars for teachers who are teaching who don't have their certification, because finance is a barrier. Because I have talked to people who are certified in other places, other states, or came here after Hurricane Maria. I do anticipate we will probably get more folks from the Caribbean because of Hurricane Fiona, who are teaching in our district and have been teaching for a number of years and cannot pass the certification and then can't afford to recertify, right? There's a language barrier for some of them. And so I'm very happy to hear that with these new individuals, you're going to be looking at, individualized plans for their certification and success. But I would be remiss if I did not highlight that we have a number of individuals at a number of our schools who have been teaching uncertified, and financially the required fees are a barrier for them as they're trying to get situated and settled and support their families and just make do. And not everybody has, $1,000 or $1,200 to drop on a certification. And then to not pass it because there's a language barrier, right? So I would love for us to figure out how do we tap into those individuals as well and support them and look at using ARP dollars. And so if there are no other feedback, comments, or questions, Chris, I would like to thank you, Dr. Miller, for your presentation tonight. And I look forward to continuously working with you in the HR committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There is no matters to go into executive session tonight. There is a board survey if you choose to complete it. And then with that, that concludes our first Human Resources meeting for the 22-23 school year. Again, next month, you will have a report. I'm going to claim that it is in draft form so that if you see it all and you feel like this is not as comprehensive as it needs to be, or you want it to be more comprehensive, that will be an opportunity to provide some feedback as we move forward, so that it could be modified until we have a solidified plan that we all can stand and support together as a unit. So with that, the next meeting for the Human Resources Committee will be in November. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Malloy, second. Second by Commissioner Adams. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a good night, everyone.
Night.